Hello and welcome to the LRM podcast, sponsored by Adrian Flux Insurance. I'm Martin Domoney, and Steve isn't here today because we've got a very special guest. Jimmy de Ville's here.
Off the telly.
Off of the telly. How are you doing, Jim?
Oh, you know what? It's lovely to be here. We've had quite a fun day, haven't we?
We've had a very fun day. A very busy day, but a very fun day.
We've been snapping lots of pictures.
Lots of pictures, lots of video.
Lovely, in quite an incredible location.
Indeed. I've never been here before.
No.
You're a bit of a veteran, so we're actually at Goodwood.
We are at Goodwood, yeah.
What an incredible venue.
It is, isn't it? There's just so much going on here and just backdrops like you're not going to see anywhere else in the world.
Exactly. And you might not necessarily think, oh, Goodwood, that's not very Land Rover, but have you seen the fleet of Land Rovers they have here?
They have here. And I mean, we went somewhere today that I've never been before, didn't know existed, that is very Land Rovery. But we can't say more.
Sorry, I was swigging tea then.
You were. But maybe people have to look at the article to find out what that was.
Yes, they will. They have to keep an eye on Land Rover Monthly magazine and all will be revealed. But very exciting.
Yeah, brilliant. What a day. Yeah.
We just thought, we'd grab this time with you and have a chat about how, because you're, diehard Land Rover fanatic.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I've kept a little bit of a secret, maybe, but I have. I mean, my Land Rover passion started, I would say when I was 18. It's been a long journey that's taken me around the world, literally, and quite an incredible love affair. I'm not going to lie. Do you want to know where it started?
I would love to know.
Okay, so it started in. This is going to be a long story. Buckle up. Okay, so it all started when I was a sixth former in school, and the deputy head, who I despised as a man, came in and said, "You could take some time out and go travelling," and he quipped, "You could even go to the Falkland Islands." And at that moment, I said, "I am going to the Falkland Islands," which at the time, 99.9% of all vehicles in the Falkland Islands, and that's not an overestimation, that's literally what they were Land Rovers.
Absolutely. We've actually, a few months ago, run a few pieces in the mag about the Forest Rovers, which still survive there in the Falkland.
Yeah. So I lived in I worked on a farm out there, and I lived in a very remote settlement, and I wanted to get out and about a little bit. So how I managed to buy a Land Rover, my first Land Rover, was I had to call up the local radio station, who then put an ad out on the radio. And the place I lived was North Arm. The nearest settlement to that was Goose Green.
Right.
And then from there was a road to MPA, which is the military base, and then Stanley. And so basically, via the power of radio, I got someone to agree, this all happened over the radio, to drop off an old 2A at Goose Green. So the next time I went to Goose Green, I got to look at the vehicle, and I deemed I liked it because it was the only one that was there. So I left them money, which I believe at the time was £400.
Right.
And took this old 2A, knowing nothing about it, not really having any experience. And it was ragged. It didn't have door tops. It had one brake that worked.
Right.
And
wow.
It was rough, I mean, it didn't have headlights. We used to have the old mag lights.
Yeah.
The big batteries out of the not door top. To light the way going cross country, yeah. So that was my first introduction to Land Rovers. But it was incredible because as a community full of Land Rovers, you do things at weekends like have a bulkhead changing party.
Yes.
Everyone would just get into a garage and get together, and over a weekend, in one of the farm Land Rovers, would change the bulkhead on an old county.
It's still like that to an extent here.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
in the UK, you get together with your mates and you make, everyone clubs together, and then you'll go and do someone else's stuff another weekend. And it's that sort of spirit and that community that makes Land Rover so great.
Yeah,
many things.
It pulls people together, doesn't it?
So the 2A was where it all kicked off for you.
It was where it all kicked off, and it absolutely got me hooked because I started trying to repair the brakes and the things, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I had very little amount of equipment or spares. But it just started tinkering with it and getting involved. And so when I came back, I knew that my first vehicle in the UK was going to be a Land Rover.
Right.
And there'd been a Series 3 that I had coveted. My neighbours owned it. We live in the countryside. And it was an old Series 3 short wheelbase. And its number plate was my initials, JDV.
Wow.
JDV 751N.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I still own that vehicle today.
Fantastic.
And what actually happened, how I managed to get it, is they were pregnant, having a baby, and so money was a bit tighter, and the head cracked. They took it to the local garage, who were going to work on it. Took it all to parts. Said, the head cracked, and they couldn't be bothered with it at the time, focusing on baby. So they said the garage has offered us £400 for it again. You can have it £400. So I was like, yeah, absolutely. So I towed it back, but I knew nothing about it, so I had to buy a manual. and start working out all kinds of parts. So, and that was the first engine I ever built.
Making owners into mechanics, as they say.
Yeah, that was it. It absolutely did. It was a baptism of fire, but it was just such a joy. You know, I was working in the garage until early hours of the morning, until building your first vehicle that you go on your first road trips in, and you've made that thing breed and work and move. It's such an amazing feling.
Yeah, it's a great sense of achievement, isn't it? And actually, the skills you pick up that you might not realise you have picked up at the time, they all build up over the years, and before you know it, you'll be a pretty half decent mechanic.
Yeah, I will confess I did some things that I look back on and think, wow, okay, that was special. But, you know, it's a learning curve, isn't it? And what was great is it's really accessible to learn, and you can get away with things on Land Rovers. You know, they're very forgiving vehicles. You can get things a little bit wrong. And so for vehicles to learn on, you know, I was doing metal work and making new panels and things to repair them, riveting things over things that probably shouldn't have been hidden. But you know what? Yeah, that was where the journey started. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Obviously, you're known for your TV work, but your background's actually in engineering, isn't it? So
yeah.
Yes, that kind of fitted in to an extent.
Yeah. No. What's happened? Land Rovers, you need to come up with engineering solutions, and when you live with a Land Rover, to get that really working harmoniously, you know, what I love about all different Land Rovers, whenever you see someone on their Land Rover, the things they have done to that vehicle to make it suit their way of life, it's always unique and slightly different.
Sure.
And exactly that with mine, you know, I've always wanted to tweak them and make them suit my lifestyle. I mean, my Series III was when I was surfing, so there was a rack made for surfboards. We used to drive around it with no roof on it, you know, go down to Cornwall and stuff. And it was geared towards that. And as you live with them, you tend to gear them. So my engineering has always made me want to tweak my vehicles to suit what I'm doing with them at the time. I mean, you know, my latest one that I've done and this build for has all been about me getting out and spending time in nature, and it being a really great launch pad for me to do that.
Absolutely. No, I mean, we've spent the day together, you know, with the vehicle as well, and I think you've done a fantastic job, and I'm sure our readers will agree when they see it in the magazine. So you also, as well as engineering background, you came across Land Rovers in your military career.
Yeah. So I also spent quite a few years working with the military, and served in both Iraq and Afghanistan, and in both locations, the Snatch Land Rover was the vehicle that, because of the roles I were doing, I ended up working with. I did force protection in Iraq, in the Basra region, and that sort of my job was, I was a convoy commander, so I was in charge of 6 Snatch Land Rovers. That was a team of 24 young men and women, and so 4 people per vehicle, 2 gunners, a driver and a commander, and so what we would do is give protection to any assets moving around. So it could be a high-ranking officer moving from one base to another for a meeting, which would be a smaller convoy, or it could be 20 Arctic trucks bringing water, food, supplies from Kuwait across the border up to Basra. So longer drives. We also did a reconnaissance into the desert to find new routes, and the Americans built a road all the way from Kuwait all the way to Baghdad, and we wanted to find a route that we could cut across the desert to pick this road up. The idea being that this road was safe because they had built it. Turned out not to be the case.
So wow.
Yeah, so one of the great jobs I had very fondly was just setting off with a small team of people across the desert to find safe routes, to this road. And there was a very funny story. This road was having a grand opening where the Americans were very excited. So the first American supply convoy was coming, and there was all these high-ranking American officers. This is on the border of Kuwait, waiting to receive this American convoy. Well, the Brits had another idea, and it was my team that took the first British convoy, and we appeared out of a sandstorm, much to the Americans' disgust, as the first convoy that came across the border at their new, very special crossing that they had built. Yeah, the Brits turned up, sort of rag-bagged, and the Americans had been held up because they all worked on satellite navigation. They had very sort of higher tech bits of kit, and if sandstorms came, they didn't work.
Right.
They would stop. We had maps. They don't fail. Yeah, they don't fail. They don't fail in sandstorms. So you can keep going. So and there we are. We rolled across the border, and there was all this to be greeted by this big party who just shooed us away. Please don't be here. You haven't been the first convoy. So I'm sure in history, it still says the Americans were the first to use that crossing into Kuwait.
Yeah.
It was some British and dirty old snatchers.
How did you actually find the Land Rovers in that environment, in that sort of workplace, if you like? Were they okay?
I'll be honest with you, they were heavily worn. So we had two, the Snatch 1.5, which was a V8, a Rover V8, and I think it was the 2 which had the 2.5 diesel engine. And the V8s they were at the end of their lives. They were struggling. The demand when vehicles like that are built, as then operational environment develops, more kit is put on them. And it tends to be more electronic kit.
Right.
So then the engines are having to deal with more and more alternators. I think there were like 2 or 3 alternators on some vehicles.
Big electrical loads.
Yeah, big electrical loads. And of course that's all draining on the performance. And all the components, as we all know, start to wear on Land Rovers. So they start to struggle. And I remember the V8s really were at the end of their lives.
Wow. Okay.
So there wasn't always reliability, and we had a situation where, especially doing the long range stuff into the desert, we would literally take a lorry, like a high-ab with a spare Snatch on the back that we could change in 20 minutes because we were so used to them. They did break down. And it was 2006, 2007. I think the military hadn't quite caught up with the quality of equipment. It was old equipment. This is stuff that was really designed for Northern Ireland.
Wow.
We were using in Kuwait. So
completely different environment.
Yeah, completely different environment. And so the vehicles were doing really well, but probably outside of their original designed remit. I mean, they'd had some sand-coloured paint.
That's the extent.
Yeah. They hadn't really been. They did have aircon units in them as well, but yeah, it was all a little bit less effective than you maybe would have liked.
Wow. Yeah. It's. I bet it was a testing time.
It was a testing time. I tell you what, though, if you did want to cook a military issue sausage roll, the V8s were the engine to have.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a bit hotter. Get the optimum temperature.
Get the optimum temperature and lots of nice V-shaped spaces to put your sausage rolls in. You got to turn them over after about 45 minutes of driving, and a perfectly cooked sausage roll.
Quintessentially British cuisine.
Yeah.
Essentially British vehicle.
Yeah, the desert sausage roll.
Desert sausage roll. Fantastic. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. I don't think Greggs would be quick on the uptake for that.
No. Yeah, again, then Afghanistan, we used. I worked up in Kabul, where in a city you wanted a smaller vehicle to nip around the streets, tighter streets, and yet again we were using Snatchers there, overtly using Snatchers. We also used, I think, like Toyota Hiluxes, but civilian style ones.
Right.
But the Snatch was the vehicle, sort of the military-looking vehicle at that time. To go around Kabul because of the tight streets.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, I did. We had one day that was fun. We were right in the middle of this sort of bazaar area where quite often you'd get someone shoot over your heads, and we can never tell whether there was warning or aggressive. But anyway, you knew you weren't really welcome, and to see one of our wheels overtake us in the middle, and then all the wheel nuts had come off this Snatch, and we were stuck in the middle of the city. With 3 wheels. You've never seen such a quick, Formula 1-esque.
I bet.
Yeah, just changing that wheel pretty quick.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, fair play to you, and yeah. Not a situation many people have been in, and not many, it takes a certain strength and a certain type of person to go through that.
Yeah, also it's just grown that bond with Land Rovers because they saw me safely through that, and we did have some hairy moments. We did have IEDs, explosive devices, go off on us, and they've kept me safe. So I'm really lucky. And yet again, it's one of those things. That has grown my fondness. And I will say, when you go to a show and there's quite often a military set of Land Rovers, and I see a Snatch, it really does. I gaze at one, and people think, "Oh, you think that looks cool?" And I think, "Oh, I'm thinking lots of other things than that." But we had fabulous times with them, really fabulous times, and you can fit a lot of Gatorade that we used to borrow off the Americans in the back of a Snatch. As
wow,
well. Yeah.
God, I'm learning so much about the crossover of food and drink.
Yes.
Fantastic stuff. Yeah. Cool. Well, obviously, people will probably know your name and your image and who you are from probably watching your TV shows. So cars and Land Rovers and machines. In general, they'll know you from Fifth Gear. They'll know you from Engine Addict. They'll know you from Goblin Garage. Goblin Works. Sorry. Land Rover's obviously played a part in a couple of those.
Yeah, I've done on telly, fifth gear. I've done lots of Land Rover stuff. Goblin Works Garage, I built 2. We slammed one, controversially.
I remember it well. I was actually working on Land Rover Owner International, and Mark, one of my colleagues, went and did the feature on that car. And it really divided opinion, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. It's funny because what people didn't realise, I think they thought I was some sort of Satanist at the time, maybe. And what they didn't realise is that I'm actually a real Land Rover purist and very much into them. But I realised that this would cause controversy, and that's a great thing. That's a great power. But also it was about embracing different cultures and doing something that makes people look. And something iconic, and using an iconic vehicle to do that. And what better base is there than a Land Rover? The funny story behind that Slam one is the donor car that was never told. The donor car we originally bought was actually an ex-military vehicle, and when it turned up, it had all the insignia on it and came with this massive file of military history, and it'd been something that towed some artillery pieces. And we all stood around and said, we can't do this to this vehicle. And so that vehicle we actually sold and bought the one that we did on the show. So if people think there wasn't sensibility in there, there was. But also what people need to understand is that it was exciting to create conversation. And I always say exciting vehicles are Marmite vehicles. There are vehicles that some people will hate and some people will love. And that vehicle did that. I had it on show, and there was Land Rover, people from Land Rover clubs, some coming and absolutely loving it, and some couldn't even bear to look at it because they thought it was horrific. But that for me is exciting as an engineer and a creative, of having that conversation, because look, everyone's vehicles are different, aren't they? And we can all like things and dislike things, especially in Land Rovers. There's so many bits we can bolt onto them, and we can all have our things that we like and dislike. And it's about that, though. That's about being individual and doing you. I always say that once you've bought a vehicle, it's your metal, enjoy it, and make it an extension of you, and go out there and smile. And if you're smiling, you're doing the right thing.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. I think it's only a good thing that people, especially now, are becoming more and more creative with what they do with Land Rovers, because, other chapters, if you like, of the car scene, they've been doing that stuff for years, whereas Land Rovers have sort of become, they stayed quite regimented and quite, not boring, but there wasn't quite that creativity in these circles. And now you can see people really getting, sort of thinking outside the box and doing their own thing. And it's not going to appease everyone, but you don't do it to appease everyone. No. You do it to it's what you want to do with your vehicle. And like you say, once you've paid your money to do it, you've got license to treat it and to modify it however you see fit for what you want to do. And enjoy it to its maximum potential.
I will also say that's the only vehicle I've ever built that someone's made a replica of. So someone copied it, and actually I suddenly saw an advert and someone had copied it and done an exact replica of it and was selling it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Because there's a couple about, you mentioned earlier, that have been, it's a Land Rover bodywork but on a Beetle chassis.
Yes.
Whereas the one that you did was, you kept as much Land Rover in it as you possibly
could. Yes, that's the thing that people always have this fixation on you've copied someone, and if we're saying we copied someone because someone else slammed the Land Rover, then yes, 100%. But because what people need to realise is you always do things in your way and in your style. And it was always not a frustration, but I always used to giggle to myself, I suppose, because people say, "Oh, you've copied it. There's been this one, and this one's lower." And I was like, "No, that's a Beetle body." Running gear with a Land Rover body. That's not a slammed Land Rover.
Yeah, sure.
That's a Beetle with a Land Rover body. Different thing. Yes, it gives the appearance of a slammed Land Rover, but it's not a slammed Land Rover. And I don't think people understood my nuances of the time, that I wanted to have the lowest slammed Land Rover. It means it's still running a Land Rover chassis. It means it's still running leaf springs. It was as close to being a standard Land Rover, but heavily slammed as we could get it, with a few fun tweaks.
I was going to say, if you're perhaps not familiar with Goblin Works Garage, it's a series that focused on old cool cars, were then modified to be even cooler, essentially.
Yeah.
This particular Land Rover, it was Series 2 or Series IIA?
It was Series IIA, yeah.
And it was, so as you said, you've kept as many elements as possible, but like the chassis was modified, like you say, it's retained leaf springs.
Yeah.
It was still a 2.25 petrol.
Still a 2.25 petrol, yeah. Still running the rear axle as standard.
A fantastic looking piece of machinery, a great stance to it, but until you dig under the surface, you might well assume it is just another series of body panels dropped on something else. But you really put the work in.
Yeah.
And, hats off to you for that.
Well, it was. You know what? Sorry, when you're playing with Land Rovers, for me, that's always just a massive joy.
Well, I think that's half the reason we do it. It's that individuality, and anyone can pick up spanners and have a go with a Land Rover.
Yeah.
And you're very unlikely to mess something up badly enough that it can't be fixed.
Yeah, and going back to me in my youth, parts are relatively cheap when you look at them compared to other automobiles. So that if you do mess something up, I mean, I can remember doing bearings and bushings and hitting them with a hammer and then mangling them and thinking, oh, I've ruined that. And then you think, well, if it's £2, go back and buy another one and have another go. And if you end up having the fourth go, you still not spend anything like you'd spend getting the work done, and you've learned a massive amount. And that was where, for me, it was brilliant, because I could do it on a shoestring. I could do it without a lot of money that I didn't have, and it was just super accessible. I mean, literally so accessible that when I was working on my engine, I could stand in the engine bay. Yeah, there's not many vehicles where you could do that.
Sure. Like Steve and I've spoken about before, that we're so spoiled with the number of aftermarket suppliers, parts, and again, the cost of them is pales in comparison to a lot of other marques. Maybe obviously Series and Defenders. There's so many of them made. There's always going to be a demand. People are still there's never been such a strong market for rebuilding and restoring these things. Yeah, people want to keep them going.
Yeah,
and because of that, parts are good and cheap, and there's plenty of them.
Yeah, the availability is fantastic.
Long may it continue.
Absolutely. I mean, and what's beautiful about the scene at the moment is they are all getting. They're not getting surface overhauls. They are getting full. I mean, these are built Land Rovers, so that means that they are getting a new life of 30 years.
Yeah,
put back into them. It's not just, they're not being patched up now. They are getting completely rebuilt, and it's been lovely seeing that happen, because you're thinking, wow, this is going to carry this on, and it needs to, because otherwise they would be gone. So it's fabulous for me. It's got me re-excited about them. The last few years, all the sort of beautiful work that's going. There's companies doing some real Coach Works ones, but there's also just very sympathetically, beautifully building a new series, which it's nigh on a new series Land Rover when it's done, and it's wonderful to see.
Absolutely. So obviously you had your Series 3 years ago. Yep. You then had when did you venture into Defenders?
So the Series 3, it was my daily driver, and I was trying to commute to at the time I was working in London doing special effects, and so I was trying to commute to the train station every time. And the series just, bless her, she got a bit tired, so I decided, I'd made a few quid by that time, so I decided to buy as my third car that I'd own a 200 TDI, which I remember buying for about £7,000 at the time. That was like, I mean,
it's like a chunk of money.
Yeah, it was a chunk of money. Yeah, it was. But it was that 200 TDI was in incredible condition. It was a very sad story. The gentleman that owned it had absolutely coveted it, and sadly died of cancer, I seem to remember. And his wife had put it for sale, and literally I'd phoned the next day, and she thought it was a joke because how quickly. But it was just in the village next door to mine. And I went and saw it and fell in love with it. It was a beautiful green colour, and it had all the whistles and bells, and everything he had done to it I loved, and he had never got it out of the garage.
Right.
Sadly, it was sort of a project he'd had. So I was really lucky to buy that car, and that's when, for me, things really took off, because this was a vehicle now that I could seriously do miles in. I could go, whenever I went anywhere in the Series 3, driving to Cornwall would take 10 hours, and I'd adjust the points 3 times. And I remember driving back from Cornwall once without a starter motor because it just decided to die. So we couldn't stop at a petrol station every time we're filling up. But suddenly this 200 TDI had the reliability, and it was like, wow, okay, now I have the same kind of vehicle, but I can, it does everything I want.
Sure, they are. I mean, they're still a very, very basic car. The 200 TDI era Defender, they're still pretty agricultural. But
it's the one for me, though. That is my one. For me, that's the sweet spot. I know a lot of people are 300 TDI, a little bit more performance, but for me, I like that agriculturalness.
The 200, I think,
it's bomb-proof.
The best engine Land Rover I've ever made.
For me, it is for me.
The toughest. You've still got good amount of power. You keep up with modern traffic. fix it with a rock.
Yeah,
they're.
It was also my voyage into diesel engines, and which diesel engines, there's a whole load of more magic going on with those that to get your head round could be certainly on a modern diesel pretty daunting. Where that 200 TDI was great to teach me diesel because it was like you say, you could fix it with a rock.
Yeah,
and so it wasn't like too daunting. You get to grips with it because very different subject from petrol engines, and it was really accessible. Yet again, Land Rovers did this massive education for me.
Yeah, this it's all they really do. The skills you build up and the things, the mechanical mechanical sympathy you get from driving a Land Rover, especially something like a Series every day. It really stands you in brilliant stead for lots of other things in life, as do. And I've mentioned this subject before in the podcast because I'm really passionate about it, and I know we've sort of got common ground here. Radio controlled stuff.
Yeah.
Sort of geeking out a little.
We were, weren't we?
Yeah. So I've said before, regardless of whether it's a scaled down version of a 4x4, a Land Rover, or something else, the crossover of mechanical parts, elements, things like differentials, suspension units, ball joints, things like that, is huge. You learn so much from building radio control cars, and I know you yourself are.
Well, that's where it started for me. Radio control cars. That's the first car I built. But like you just saying, the dampers, they really work. Differentials, understanding what's in a differential. It's the same stuff.
Yeah,
it's just bigger and heavier, and there's a sort of more complicated bolts that you have to fight more.
They don't rust quite so badly, do you?
Yeah, no, but it's exactly the same. It's a miniature version, and it's amazing because it is that. I don't know. It's like looking inside. You can do that because you start with this box of bits. That pretty much how I started with my Series III. That you have to put together, so you learn as you're doing it, and that for me was a massive joy. And then the joy once you put it together, it going and working, just incredible. I mean, we both geeked on RC cars and
Tamiya specifically.
Yeah, Tamiya specifically. The way they do the instructions. I'm dyslexic, so I always struggle with my reading, and so having these beautiful instructions with visual references that you can just follow, it, for me was like, it's the same as the first time I went to a Leonardo da Vinci exhibition and I saw his paintings, and I was like, that's how my head works. And
right,
it's like a real click moment.
Wow.
I was like, that his drawings of things, but I was like, oh, why haven't I been shown things like this before? This is what I understand. This is how my, I was like 8 or something in primary school, and I was like,
that's really
this
cool.
is someone who I understand this guy. These are the books I needed to be seeing. And Tamiya was the same. He was suddenly these beautiful exploded drawings, and I was like, this makes sense to me. This is how my head thinks, because a lot of dyslexic people, we think in images, 3-dimensional, that we can spin around and work in our heads.
Wow.
And suddenly here it was in a book. And I was like, oh, this is my language. I know this language. These word things I've been struggling with haven't made sense. And suddenly I have these instructions. And it was fantastic. It was just like absolutely the thing that led me into this industry, this world of making things.
Yeah.
Because I could understand that. And it made sense to me in ways that other people would struggle, that probably my struggle is reading a book.
Yeah.
This for me was...
I can completely get on board with what you're saying. I can remember actually the first sort of few months of my apprenticeship. I did my apprenticeship with Land Rover back when I was, would have started when I was 16, standing in the training centre at Gaydon at the time, and the instructor talking us through how these different components worked.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel smug, but I sort of had in the back of my head, I'm probably got quite an advantage over a lot of other people in here because I'd spent all these years doing the same thing but in a 10th scale.
Yeah.
And it was just fantastic. And obviously now we've never been quite so lucky with the especially a Land Rover models and radio controlled scale 4x4s you can buy off the shelf. Tamiya do too.
Yeah. Do you know what I love is I don't know if this has ever happened to you. I've been on a walk in the middle of nowhere, and suddenly I've come across 2 people with backpacks on full of batteries, and they're RC 4x4s, and I just thought that is fabulous. It's something I've never done, but what a lovely, and they're focusing on how they're driving the vehicles. In their head, I'm sure they're driving a full-size off-roader, because they're looking at the little bumps and the ridges, and they're driving around, and I thought, wow.
Have you ever scrolled through Facebook or something and you've seen a photo of like a Defender on like a creek crossing, and you've gone, oh wow, that looks really cool. And then you look a bit closer and you're like, hang on, that's got one big wheel nut in the middle, not 5 small ones. And you realise it's actually scaled.
But they're just incredible now, the detail. But not only the detail, the way they go over the terrain. It's like they go over in a scale manner. It's not like when I was, younger, things were maybe a bit. The way the suspension works is perfect. Wow.
It's there's something else now. But even like Tamiya have obviously done their re-releases over the years, haven't they? And it's been great too. Although they were a little bit before my time when I started getting into radio control. The character of them, like the way, the bounciness and quite rubbish handling.
But it was kind of fun, wasn't it? I don't know. They're sort of bombastic and just, I just think, again, what Tamiya did, which was marvellous, is they designed beautiful characters of vehicles. We were saying earlier about giving your vehicle your expression and your character.
Sure.
They had these wonderful characters, the lunchbox, the Hornet.
The box art, like the
dreamy.
Hand drawn. Just seeing a row of Tamiya boxes on a shelf in a shop, just like, if you could bottle that nostalgia, sell it, you would be a millionaire.
Yeah, that is wonderful.
And actually, I mean, we've alluded to it. The styling of one of the Tamiya models played quite a big part in how you've put your Land Rover together. This creation of yours.
Yeah, it did. The Hornet was like a kind of sand racer, and I mean, a lot of Tamiyas had the spotlights, the kind of KC Daylighter style spotlights. A lot of them had, or various other types of spotlight, but they had these spotlights. But also those vintage stripes that they had.
Yes,
and the Hornet in particular had this orange and yellow stripes, which have gone on the Land Rover. Not only that, I would say Tonka toys as well, which are a little bit older school, more 70s. They always had, this kind of Californication kind of beach
like the blocky, sort of solid line graphics. All like quite bright primary colours. I'm really on board with that. And as I say, with the magazine Land Rover Monthly in an upcoming issue, we really deep dive into exactly what made that vehicle come together and in the way that it did. So,
for me, these are vehicles that I've had from my youth, and maybe people are less aware of the fact that they were, I've been working with Land Rovers since in my teens. And so when I built this one, I've looked back to what else was going on in my life that was inspiring me. And so this is a little bit of a kind of, I'm in the middle of my life, like enjoying those things and celebrating a bit of my past in this vehicle, because this vehicle has been like a reinvigoration of my joy, not only of Land Rovers, but those things as well. It's just, that's a place I found myself in my life, revisiting those things and going, I want to celebrate these, and I'm back building Tamiya models and enjoying those, and why not? I say this a lot, as we become more adult, we forget the power of play, and I think that is to our detriment as human beings. And actually, what we need to do is explore that and go back. And it doesn't mean you have to spend loads of money, and it doesn't mean you have to do grand things. You can get this amazing joy, but just have to think, and people say, that's childish. It's like, try it. Just try it for a minute. Let that this is childish thing go. And suddenly you'll find yourself joyfully smiling for no apparent reason. And I think as adults, we can forget that. And doing these things, I think, is healthy for us in a mental capacity, and just laugh about life a bit and have those funs that we just were so natural to us as children, and we move away from because we just think, it's not appropriate anymore. And actually, when you go back to them, you're like, this is brilliant again. Why not? Why not just sit on a rainy afternoon? This is what I call a Formula One afternoon. Okay. I have a poof in front of my sofa.
Yeah.
Formula One is on. It's raining. Right?
Okay.
It's probably a Sunday roast in the oven, and then on the poof I have a chopping board like thing. This is my modelling board,
right,
which fits Tamiya on perfectly. So I sit for the day, the roast is cooking, and I make some Tamiya, and there's a fire, and it's just the best day. It's like the best Christmas day. And I'm an adult. I can do this when I like now. Like, this is fantastic. And it's just joyful. It's just pleasant, and it's just peaceful. And I get great respite from it, and great thinking time. I love it. It's fantastic.
I'm completely on board.
Yeah.
I mean,
Tamiya sales now are going through the roof, like because of our conversation.
I hope so. I hope they carry on. I really do hope they continue, and I hope they keep re-releasing more old stuff from the past.
Yeah.
And there's such a following for it.
Yeah. Can I do a little drop in from what's coming from me? A little tease. I'm going to be doing more Tamiya stuff.
Before you do,
all right, okay.
Let's just have a quick word from our sponsors.
We're proud to partner with Adrian Flux, an insurance broker that specialises in covering all types of Land Rovers, including classic, ex-military, modified and Q-plated models. Adrian Flux offers a range of optional extras to make the policy your own and can provide cover for off-roading, green laning, agreed value and build-up cover. Plus, they even offer a discount of up to 15% for Owners Club members. Simply search Adrian Flux Land Rover Insurance for more information or call them directly on 0344 728 0417 for a quote.
Right, we're back.
So that was good, wasn't it?
You just left us on a cliffhanger.
I did, yeah.
Let's hear all about this exciting project you've got.
Well, this is you're hearing this. You're the first person to hear this.
Is it top secret?
It is top secret. Yeah, it's top secret. But
you do know we're on a podcast, don't you?
Yeah, but listen, if there's anyone that can keep a secret, it's Land Rover.
Okay.
People may or may not know, I started doing live Tamiya builds just for my love of it. I thought I'm going to share this. It was sort of lockdown kind of pandemic period, and I'd realised that they'd done these re-releases, and I'd bought one, and I thought it was lockdown. People were struggling. I thought, you know what, I'm going to go on Facebook Live, and I'm going to do 1 hour of build a night live, and just I thought if 2 people tune in and spend some time with me, I'm on my own. And I give them a bit of respite. This is fab, and they share in the joy of me building this Tamiya. And that was honestly the goal. Well, 250,000 people later, I was like, oh, what has just happened?
I was one of them.
Yeah. So people tuned in, and it was fun. It was me in my pajamas, eating Christmas chocolate, talking about anything. It wasn't talking about just building. I was there building, but the conversations were about anything, mental health, all sorts of stuff. All sorts of stuff. You could ask me anything, and I was trying to answer it as honestly as I could, if it was appropriate. And it was lovely. And it was suddenly this community came, and I thought, this is amazing. So I've gone on from there, and every year I've tried to find the time to do one of these live builds, if not more. But I wanted to do more. But the thing is, when you put lots of time into stuff, you need to, we still need to go out and earn money and pay bills. So the exciting news is that there is something coming to social media, which is me building Tamiya, talking, meeting people, doing exciting RC stuff. There is some incredible products going to be launched as well from a very retro thing that have never been available. It's very limited edition that are going to be coming with it that are going to help fund. So there's merch. There's merch, which is exciting.
Merch is good.
Yeah, Tamiya merch.
We haven't got on the merch bandwagon yet, and I feel like it might be something we need to do. But actually, I'll be keeping a close eye on that.
Yeah, so retro Tamiya merch and me just sort of going mad in my pajamas making Tamiya is coming. It's coming to the internet near you.
So if people want to get on board, and I know a lot of our listeners, I get great feedback whenever I mention Radio Control on the podcast. People were like, oh, I get loads of emails and people sending me pictures. Like that.
Yeah, that's what's wonderful about the scene, right? There's people love to share it. That's so brilliant. It's so much fun. Love it.
Just want to get involved.
Yeah.
If you don't already follow Jimmy on his socials, how can people get involved?
On the RC side, what you're going to need to look for, and this is the exclusive, is it?
Oh, okay.
It is going to be called de Ville Talks Tamiya.
Fantastic.
So talks spelt in talking, as in talking a nut or bolt up, as in the QU. Yes,
got you.
De Ville Talks Tamiya. That is the new thing that's coming. It's going to be on all the socials, Instagram, Facebook Live, which is where it started, and the Tube of You.
The Tube.
So yeah, we're going to be doing a whole load of social on it. It is going to be not only me building them, but also going out and seeing model shops, which are places I love.
Yeah,
aren't they? They're special caves. They're special places.
Yeah, I completely agree. And actually, like, Land Rover's always been a huge part of my life. But one of the best memories I have as a kid is my dad taking me to model shops. Even when I knew I wasn't going to get anything, because they are expensive.
Yeah, but you would see things.
But just soaking in the atmosphere and seeing absolutely awesome. So I will definitely be keeping
an eye. I love it. And that's one of the things I want to do. I wanted to go to model shops around the country, and that's where I'm going to start a build, is going in there, getting the bits I need, do a build, and then for that build there will be a limited edition T-shirt that you can get that is in keeping with the build I'm doing.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Very special stuff.
Obviously, building radio-controlled stuff, building Land Rovers. You worked in special effects, which is another form of building.
Well, so this is here. You ready for the crossover now? This is all going to come together beautifully.
I hope so. I'm digging.
Yeah. So this is the beautiful thing. So I was building my radio control stuff, and I like making the weird and the wonderful. And after I did my degree, the first job I got was, believe it or not, designing toys for Action Man.
Really?
Yeah. And so I decided.
Didn't he drive a Jeep though?
Yeah, well, listen, I tried to get him in a Tamiya. I tried to get him in a Tamiya buggy. So they had this brief that they wanted to bring modern. You remember the eagle eyes where he looked?
Yeah.
So they wanted to modernise this. And now this is where I get really frustrating. I don't know if you've noticed in the RC scene, there's this thing now that people are doing. There's loads of posts on it where they've animated the drivers.
Yes.
Well, this is early noughties. I have rebuilt an Action Man, did all the linkage, and then in a Tamiya buggy, I've made the steering wheel turn when you turn left and right, and then linked him up so he's got a hand on the gear stick and a hand on the steering wheel. So and it was linked through to his head. So when he turned left, he moved his hand left and he looked left. Same for right, and then when he did forwards and backwards, he did the gear stick, which has become really popular. And I kicked myself because I was thinking I was doing that in the noughties. And so I did this build for Action Man. So it's bringing him to life in this RC vehicle. Now Hasbro sadly decided, and it went through quite a few stages, but they decided then they weren't going to go with Action Man into the RC world.
Right, okay.
But I was working on this at the time, and my brother is a scriptwriter. And he had written, this is when Channel 5 was brand new, and he had written a horror show called Urban Gothic. And Urban Gothic had kind of all sorts of weird, mystical things going on it as a show. And one of the things he wanted was this RC vehicle, like there was a team that were fighting ghouly things,
okay,
that went into a room kind of searching, and they decided that they couldn't afford to write it, so they had asked him to write it out with the script. And he did the opposite. He said, my brother can build that. And he asked me, he said, look, I'll pay for the bits. I got to go to my local model shop and buy like the biggest RC car, Tamiya RC car there was. And so I built this kind of thing with a camera on the top that looked, mag lights that looked left and right, turned on and off. And we turned up at the production office, he goes, here we go, this. And they were like, wow, that's amazing. So that was in the show. But then they called me 2 weeks later and said, we've got all this other stuff that we need building for the show. And now I didn't know anything. And I remember, this is my entrance to TV. I charged them £60 a day to build these what were crazy props. But what was fabulous is I worked on this whole season then making all this wonderful gadgets and gizmos. And I thought I just fell in love with the whole process because it was off the wall. It was wonderful. You could just, you weren't held by the confines of real life. And it was fabulous to build this stuff. And at the end of it, I want to do this as a job. And I collated the pictures of all that stuff and I sent it to these special effects houses in London and got a job. I got offered a job, a 2-day job, building. It was a full massive model of some sort of award for an award ceremony. And the next week, all the sort of guys, the rough, tough special effects technicians, they all had to go off on some sort of shoot. And the special effects house I work for, called Machine Shop, believe it or not, owned a set of Thunderbirds puppets.
Really?
Yeah. And the next week, they all went off on this shoot that I wasn't, and left me in this workshop in London. And we were doing a show. It was the 100 Greatest Toys, and it was presented by the Thunderbirds. So it was going to be filmed at their place. And they just said, just build the dining room for the Thunderbirds, and left me. And so I was left in this workshop, and I thought, well, I've got the Thunderbirds set, and so I got busy and built this fireplace with real fire in it and this whole set for the Thunderbirds. And they came back thinking, this guy, this young guy, not long being a student probably. And they came back and found this full set.
Just left you with free rein.
Yeah, just got on it, and I just got on it, and then it was fabulous because it was like my first real job. The actual puppeteers from the original Thunderbirds came to do the puppeteers, and I've got a photograph of me somewhere. I was puppeteering Parker with the original puppeteers from the original show on this kind of gantry above this set I built. It was absolutely fabulous, and that was me entering into the world of TV and special effects, and it was just a really fabulous being in the right place at the right time. What a fabulous thing, and it's driven me from then, and that's how I kind of got into the world of television. So for what people don't know, for years I've done the stuff in front of, but for years before that I've been the guy behind the scenes making weird and wonderful things happen, which has always been a massive joy for me.
Fantastic. That's so, almost like, the Q from James Bond, the gadget guy, making that stuff happen.
Yeah, making that stuff happen.
Yeah.
So there you go. So the RC, the Land Rover, all came together with this kind of mechanical knowledge. Had done a degree in design and engineering, and then had grown this practical knowledge from building things like RC cars and building models and playing. It all came together to suddenly, and this is a career. I mean, when we were at school, we go and see the careers advisor.
Yeah.
And you say what you're into. And I remember when I said I was into cars, they went, what? I want to be a mechanic. And the best they could do was sort of say like a Formula One team. And it's amazing how when you follow your passions, even though you may not be sure where that will actually take you, reference a career.
Yeah.
There are these careers out there. So, it's about following your dreams and doing, and playing. But you can turn playing into a career. I don't like to call it a career because it doesn't feel like I work.
I think it's all about that. If you know you can do something well and you do keep doing that thing well, you will eventually get noticed and it will take you places.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's easier to do that in some aspects of work than others.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it just goes to show right place, right time, bit of luck. I think you'd make that.
But also, I will say it's not also like it's hard work. You have to be dedicated to these things. I get frustrated when people say, "Oh, that's all amazing." I said, "Yeah," but I spent until 2:00 in the morning in the garage working on the Land Rover. I was dedicated to it. It doesn't happen overnight.
No,
you have to work at it. But it doesn't mean it's not fun. But
sure,
but you do have to put the time in. You do. These things you see lots of time now, especially with social media, people becoming very popular, even famous, very quickly, and I'm happy for them.
Yeah.
But I also say to people, but the other route is just dedication and work, and you will find your own marvelous worlds, but they do take work.
Absolutely. Well, what a fantastic insight into the background. It shows that so many different elements, Land Rovers included, of course, come together and, they can take you amazing places.
Yeah.
Talking of, you've not long come back from quite an exciting trip in your Land Rover.
Oh, yeah.
How much can you tell us about that?
Well, let me tell you everything about it.
You sort of started off with a base and then you just went, right, well, I'm going exploring now. See you later.
Yeah, so we've just been to the Pyrenees, and the marvellous people at BF Goodrich invited a whole load of people down there, all different types of people. It's a marvellous melting pot, as I like to call it. There's some really wonderful people, all really passionate about off-roading Land Rovers and just being out in the wild and having fun. And so they invited us all down there, and we did a 3 days of sort of driving Land Rovers, other 4x4s I'm not going to talk about.
No,
but mainly Land Rovers, and all Defenders actually.
Oh wow!
Yeah, there was no series. I'd like to have seen a series though. I'd like to have seen a series down there.
I'm just saying my Series 3 will be back together. So if there's an invite for next,
yeah, get it down there. I would love to have seen a series.
Well, I am open to negotiation. I will come out, bring it over.
The negotiation being, please can I come? Please
can I come? Yeah, and actually, I said before, when mine is back together, I'm currently rechassing it. I really do want to plan a good trip for it.
Yeah.
To sort of celebrate the fact that I've given it another.
I don't want you all swarming to the Pyrenees, right? Because it's fabulous. But I would say if you want to do a great trip in Land Rover, the Pyrenees is fantastic. So what happened is after 3 days doing this marvelous off-roading, I had a plan. I'd been to the Pyrenees, in about 15 years ago. I used to do a bit of enduro biking.
Oh, right, okay.
And there used to be an orienteering kind of race, I suppose, around there, but you did your own route. So everyone shot off because you were trying to get to the hardest places. And
off-road?
Off-road.
Oh, wow.
In the Pyrenees, yeah. It was so I had an old KTM. And so I'd done that and I'd won that. And I hadn't been back since then. So I knew there were these fabulous trails that went all through the mountains. So I had an idea. The plan I had was very limited. It was post doing the bit with the BF Goodrich, do some adventuring, exploring in the Pyrenees. And then a very fabulous thing happened. One of the professional drivers down there showed me a picture of this desert, which is 70 kilometres or 40 kilometres, I think, from the Pyrenees, but the sort of northern part. And we're right down the southern part. So it suddenly came together. I was like, well, I need to go to that desert. That looks fabulous. So I suddenly just thought, well, I've got 5 days. Can I drive from where we are in the Pyrenees, staying on these tracks and trails, a couple of 100 miles up through the Pyrenees to end up in the desert? And this plan had come from nowhere. It wasn't a preconceived plan. It just because they showed me the picture of the desert when I was there, and I was like, yes, going there. I've got the Pyrenees in between me. I could cut down and go on the main roads. No, let's go by the Pyrenees. So I spent 5 days in total driving. My goal was to stay off-road and on track as much as possible. And I think I probably achieved about 90%.
Wow.
Yeah, so we did it. To put it into sort of perspective, to get to the location we are from the port in Bilbao had taken a 7-hour drive. By the time I came out of the Pyrenees, the drive back to the port was 3 hours. So I'd done over half the journey back.
That's the way to do it, isn't it?
Yeah.
If the option's there, especially, I mean, whenever I do fairly long journeys in the UK, especially if I'm with Neil Watterson, who's like the absolute green laning guru, we'll sort of look at lanes along the way to break up the monotony of main roads. And it's just, and the more you can do that, the better. And obviously you made full advantage.
Yeah, it's brilliant. What was lovely is because I was on my own, so it wasn't like a big convoy. What I could do is drive until it was the right time of the night to finish and then just find a place to tuck away. And I know you've got to be sensitive about the environment you're in, the access you have, the legalities of these things. But what I always say is, keep a small footprint, be respectful.
Sure.
And I met local farmers who ended up giving me food, so I don't think I was upsetting anyone, but it's the way, I always say, when you're doing these things, it's the way you present yourself and
Definitely.
act. And you've got to act responsibly and caring and not just, not if I'd got in there tearing things up, I think I very quickly would have been told, get gone.
Yeah.
So it's about how I always say when you go on these sort of trips, it's about how you conduct yourself. That's really important. And then if you do that and you open yourself up to the world you're in and the things are going on around, and you do spend the time when the farmer's looking for horses in the middle of nowhere, helping him, just spend an hour helping him. You got no plans, spend an hour and then I found the horses that he had been spending the day looking for amongst the Pyrenees, and I went back and found him and said, I found 4 of your horses this way. I mean, bear in mind, I can't speak Spanish, and there's lots of hand gesturing and hooting of horns and things. But anyway, it was lovely. Things like that were lovely because I spent an afternoon looking for horses, and then suddenly he's given me apples fresh apples from his farm, and that's what I mean. It's about integrating and not just tearing through some countryside. It's about being in that environment.
Definitely. Good attitude, bit of politeness goes a long way.
Yeah.
Even when you don't speak.
Well, then people are happy to have you there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it was a fabulous trip, and we did end up in the desert. And
you found the desert?
I found the desert.
Excellent.
I found the desert.
A wasted trip.
I wasn't. I did have a couple of times where I had definitely decided I'd bitten off more than I could chew. On some of these trails, they are not for the faint-hearted. With respect to many miles are beautiful and in really sort of fun off-roading condition. But you have to be mindful that any time you could suddenly find yourself in a dead end with a trail in front of you. There's been a rock slide, and bad things have happened. So you've got to be really careful. I did have a couple of times I thought, on your own here, I've got I have to be super careful here. Things go wrong; they could go wrong really quickly.
Yeah.
And also, I could be 50 miles away from any kind of help in some pretty serious terrain. I went up to 5,000 feet in the Land Rover, right on the top of a mountain. Weather conditions came in, so you do have to be careful. It's not all just. That's my. How was my phone getting involved? Did you hear that?
It's listening.
That's Siri just suddenly showing out about
crikey.
Away.
Oh, that's all right.
It didn't say anything bad there. It just said something. It shouted Land Rover.
It did.
The phone shouted.
It's listening. Technology for you.
Freaky, isn't it?
But, well, yeah, by all accounts, like you were saying, actually, it's all about knowing when to pick your battle.
Yeah, but absolutely, yeah.
That far away and by yourself.
Yeah. I would always recommend people, go in 2 vehicles
Sure.
as a thing. But, when you're doing these things, that's not always available. And really spend time. Which this will freak people out. Studying maps. You cannot beat the information you can get off a map. We use a lot now apps, and they're great, but maps have things on them that are just so detailed, and just spend time looking at them and trying to plan routes. It's very valuable.
A skill in itself now, because I'm as guilty as a lot of people sort of my age. I rely completely on sat-nav. If I did a journey and put it on my sat-nav, followed it, and someone asked me, what road did you take? I wouldn't have a clue.
Yeah.
It's something that really we need to get back to basics, because like you said earlier, it's completely, they stand the test of time. They're foolproof. They don't break down when you've got no internet.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. You go in these environments and you're relying on an app, which, don't get me wrong, they're fabulous. They're fabulous up until the point you suddenly find yourself shrouded by mountains and there's no reception.
Yeah.
There's clouds come in and you can't pick up a satellite. And it's fabulous until that point. I'll tell you a quick story, a sideline. I was doing a shoot once for Fifth Gear. We were in the Welsh Hills. This is actually a Land Rover shoot in the middle of the Welsh Hills. Beautiful location near some reservoirs. And the only information they provided were a postcode and what 3 words. So I drove to the postcode and I got to the postcode and no crew there. No crew. And I thought, well, this is strange. I'm at the postcode. Should be here. And at that place, I couldn't get what 3 words to work. And I had to drive 10 kilometres from that location to get what 3 words to work.
To get signal?
To get signal.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
So I couldn't do that because I was going to be late. So, I did end up doing that out of desperation. I ended up phoning the production office and said, right, where are they? And all they could tell me were what 3... No one actually couldn't give me a location, a place. Turns out they were just at the end of the reservoir. And if someone had just gone, oh yeah, they're at Thingy Reservoir, I could have gone, all right, that's there.
Yeah.
I was literally 2 kilometres away and I ended up driving about 20 in the wrong direction.
Right.
Because no one could actually just give me a location, which I was like, this is why you've got to be careful about technology, because it's brilliant if it works. So, second, it doesn't work, you have nothing.
Yes.
And that's not good.
Incredibly convenient, but not foolproof.
Not foolproof, yeah.
No.
So I do a lot of mountain walking and stuff. And one of my rules is, although I may use an app, I will always have a map with me and a compass.
Very wise.
And I think doing something like the Pyrenees or any sort of off-roading adventures, I'd recommend that.
I was going to say, in the UK, you're not really that far. You're never really that far from anything.
No.
For better or for worse. But somewhere like the Pyrenees or, further afield even.
On this trip, there was a French group in a 4x4 had to send out help messages via the internet. They'd got their vehicle bogged in the middle of nowhere. They ended up having to walk a long way. And this was literally the week. There was a big heavy downpour halfway through when I was out there, and the tracks suddenly get flooded. They got bogged in, wrong tyres. And
not on BF Goodrich.
Yeah, they went off BF Goodrich, yeah. And a wrong tyre, and they ended up having to walk a long way until they eventually found a farm, got a tractor up there, got them out. But they'd actually put out this, is anyone in the local area? Because I got sent it from some of the other, they were a French couple, one of the French guys that had been on this trip with us sent it saying, you're not near here, are you? Go and help these people. And sadly, the funny story is I didn't get that message because I didn't have any reception until later on. And then I was like, oh, are they okay? Because I had been in the area, and by the time I got reception again, they were okay.
Well, that's good, but it does show how quickly things.
Yeah, very quickly. So yeah, go old school. That's my advice.
Go old.
Get a map. Have a go.
School in more than one, more ways than one in your method of finding direction and travel, but also you're gonna see when we get your feature in the mag.
Oh yeah,
a lot more styling cues going on with your Land Rover.
Yeah.
But no, we've had a great day, haven't we? Tooling around good.
Just fabulous, yeah. And there's 2 Land Rovers. Are they going to be in the same article?
Yes, indeed.
Well,
yes,
2,
yeah.
and they're very different. It's super exciting.
They're quite a yin and yang almost, aren't they?
Absolutely yin and yang, but both. I don't know if
cool in their own way. I'm really, really excited, and I think we'll be bigging it up before it comes out in the magazine anyway. But please do grab a copy of Land Rover Monthly, and as always. I will endeavour to keep everyone up to speed on our socials with what's going in which issue. Yeah. And it's just been an absolutely...
Can I also say, if anyone looks at the article and wants any more questions, obviously tag in Land Rover Monthly, but jump on Instagram, Jimmy_de Ville. There's always posts. Feel free to ask questions. If you see bits of kit on there, you're like, oh, how have you done that? Feel free. Jump on, post questions.
Fantastic.
But tag you guys in as well.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
It all helps. Thank you. Feed the machine.
Feed them. Exactly.
Better.
It's all one love.
It is a one love. Well, Jimmy, thanks. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast and having a chat. It's been really, really cool learning about what's gone on, got you to this point, your love of Land Rovers. We'll no doubt see a bit more from you in the future, hopefully.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure.
If you're ever in the area, we'll grab a Tamiya kit and sit down and...
you know what? That might just happen.
I'm keen. Cool. Well, thanks again for listening to the LRM podcast. We will catch you next week.
Bye-bye.